Good morning, everyone. My name is Tarnika Manning. I'm the Administrative Director for the Office of Equity and Minority Health at the Lurie Cancer Center here at Northwestern University. I just want to welcome you all to the webinar this morning, where we have three dynamic, phenomenal speakers that have lots of information to share with you all. And if you have any questions throughout this webinar, feel free to add them to the Q&A box that we have below. We will make sure we get to them towards the end of this webinar. And if there's anything that we can answer during the webinar, we will. We're going to go ahead and get everything kicked off with our first speaker, Dr. Claudia Tellez. Dr. Tellez is a board-certified hematologist oncologist. She received her medical training at the University of Illinois at Chicago in 1990. Dr. Tellez completed her residency training in internal medicine and fellowship in hematology oncology at McGall Medical Center at Northwestern University. She's a clinical assistant professor at Feinberg School of Medicine. Since 1996, Dr. Tellez has been actively involved with the Breast Cancer Tumor Board Teaching Conference and is responsible for teaching sessions for the Oncology and Internal Medicine Department at Northwestern. Dr. Tellez treats breast cancer patients here at Northwestern Memorial Hospital here in Chicago. In addition to the work she does in the clinic, she is just very dedicated to doing work in the community, providing education and awareness of the importance of cancer screening and prevention in Latino communities across the Chicagoland area. Dr. Tellez, take over.
Thank you so much, Tarnika. What a pleasure to be here with all of you guys and with the other two amazing presenters that have phenomenal, fantastic information to share with us today. So thanks again for involving me in this wonderful seminar. All right, so let me share my screen and let's get going. All right, so I was charged with the job of giving basically the general introduction of the concept of diversity in breast clinical trials. And what I wanted to do is spend a little time talking about the concepts of just clinical trials in general, and then also just introduce the concepts of how breast cancers are in many ways similar, but not exactly the same amongst the different ethnic communities. So what are clinical trials? Basically, they are new types of treatments that we utilize to investigate new medicines or new techniques of treatment. And the reason that we do clinical trials is because all of the treatments that we use in the clinic today, all of them, bar none, are treatments that we've investigated before in clinical trials. And we have to realize that the treatments that we use today have been previously mainly tested in populations of mainly white and European patients in the past. And then finally, and most importantly, the only way that we're going to get to actually find a cure for cancer, particularly breast cancer, will be through clinical trials. So what do we know in terms of disparities in clinical trial participation? So to begin with, I wanted to remind everybody that to fully ensure safety and efficacy of an anti-cancer therapy for everybody, we need to reflect the participants, need to reflect the diversity of the population that is going to be treated. And we know that there are several segments of the population that have remained underrepresented. So for example, from the biopharmaceutical clinical trials, we know that the census that they expect, only about 20% of Asians have reached the census that they have desired, 16% of Blacks, 8% of Asians, and only 7% of Hispanics are actually reaching the census that is ideal for these clinical trials. And then between 2009 and 2019, 81 oral chemotherapy drugs have been approved based on 142 clinical trials. And only 52% of the trials actually even reported race or ethnicity as part of their trial. The majority of the patients that participated in those trials, over 70% of the patients were white European, and only 2.5% of the patients were Black and 2.3% Hispanic. So very wide variability of the people that are actually participating in these clinical trials. And we know that there was one estimate of the cost that was lost due to health disparities during treatment between about 2002 and 2007 of the 4 most common cancers, lung, colorectal, breast, and prostate, and that resulted in $2.3 billion of loss based on the extra expenditures needed to compensate. So which are the US populations that are being subjected to disparities? I'm going to concentrate my comments on the ethnic communities, but we need to also remember that there can be minorities based on socioeconomic status, lack of insurance, due to some remote geographic location, people with LGBTQ plus sexual orientation, immigrants, refugees, asylum seekers, individuals with disabilities, the young adults, and the elderly. These are all people that are underrepresented in clinical trials. And then what happens with this lack of representation in clinical trials? Well, that ends up resulting in cancer health disparities. So from the moment of the continuum of the development of the cancer to the risk reduction, to the early detection, treatment, and survivorship, all of these social determinants of health are resulting in varied changes and opportunities potentially for us to use clinical trials to intervene. And so if we're not intervening at all of these levels, we are then going to result in adverse outcomes. So most specifically, why test ethnic minorities? Well, we know that from studies that patients with different ethnicities have different rates of diagnoses, different genetics, different genomic subtypes of breast cancer, as well as different outcomes. And we know that ethnic minorities are representing less than 10% of participation in clinical trials. And then finally, we know that clinical trials establish if a new cancer treatment or a new drug is safe and effective. And so a substantial lack of diversity results in a barrier of advancing the care, not only for the minorities, but really for all, because we're making wrong conclusions. So I'm going to spend a little time giving specific examples of different ethnicities as they relate to different issues. But just very quickly, this is the SEER data on the breast cancer incidence in US women by race. And you will see that between 2015 and 2019, the 2 groups that have the highest incidence of breast cancer in the United States are the non-Hispanic whites, and the non-Hispanic Blacks, with a very similar rate of incidence. I want to highlight the next 2 groups, which are the non-Hispanic American Indian, or the natives. These curves doubled, both mainly for the indigenous groups, also increased significantly for the Asian groups, and that's due to some issues that I'll note later, but mainly for the Native Americans because of just gathering more data. And then the Hispanic is the group that has the lowest incidence in the United States. So talking about incidence, I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about Asians because this is interesting. So breast cancer incidence is lower in Native Asians in their countries compared to US-born Asians due to very likely lifestyle reasons. However, very interesting trends are developing with increasing breast cancer in the Asian populations as the Asian populations are growing with increased economic development. So what we're seeing is that the recent immigration policies that have resulted in an influx of very highly skilled and educated Asian workers have resulted in increasing associated breast cancers in these populations. So the population of recent immigrants to the United States result in a 2 to 3-fold increased risk of breast cancer in the immigrant Asian population. So that's changing some of that incidence that we're seeing in those curves. Next, I wanted to spend a couple of minutes talking about the indigenous populations. So worldwide, there are more than 379 million indigenous people in over 90 countries. And the indigenous people actually face the most disadvantage with very poor cancer data collection. In fact, New Zealand is the only country in the world that actually routinely records and reports national statistics related to cancer. So while the US rates of screening with mammogram for the majority of the populations, for the Hispanics, the Asians, roughly are in the range of 60 to 70%. For the indigenous populations, those rates are between 30 and 40%. So they're doing very, very poorly in general for many different factors. But yeah, screening is very low in the indigenous population. And American Indians represent 0.1% of patients in phase 1 clinical trials and 0.43% in precision therapy trials. So a very underserved population. I want to spend a couple of minutes to talk about genetic signatures. Here's another area where there's similarities between the ethnic populations as well as discrepancies. And if we think of a genetic signature of an individual, our genetic signatures, we can see in the top bar that if we use red as the European signature, and we use green as the African or Black signature, and we use blue as the Native American signature, and we go back to the left and we look at Hispanics or Latinos, we will see that Hispanic and Latinos, very interestingly, are a mix of the other ones. And that's what we see in the genetic of Hispanic and Latino people. So that, for example, the Mexican Hispanics are about a good percentage, about half Native American and half European. However, as we move towards countries like Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic, we see that there is a higher proportion of their genetic makeup being also African. And this is important because this reflects in terms of the types of breast cancers that we see in these populations. So talking a little bit more about the genetic information in Hispanics, again, as I mentioned before, all the different races and ethnicities share a very high percentage of the genetic code. And there are some very interesting findings that in differences that can lead to either increased susceptibilities or potential targets for treatment that are unique to each ethnicity. So for example, one example is the BRCA1 mutation. So if we think of BRCA1 mutation, which is a mutation that leads to an increased risk of breast cancer in the population, we all know that the majority of BRCA1 mutation happens in the European Ashkenazi Jewish population, but turns out that there's a high percentage of Mexican patients that have BRCA1 mutations. And super interesting, one of the mutations can be traced to the original Ashkenazi Jewish ancestry that was introduced to Latin America about 650 years ago. Well, there's another BRCA1 mutation that appears to have originated specifically in Puebla, Mexico, 1500 years ago. So then scientists are able to give us a lot of information about how are we similar and how are we different, and it's very valuable information to give us data on how do we treat people and how to use that information for clinical trials. Yet another area that's very important is the genomic makeup of our tumors. So how are our tumors themselves, their genetic makeup different amongst the different ethnic groups? And here we're going to talk about Black women. We know that Black women have a higher propensity of developing triple negative breast cancers, and you guys will talk much more about that in a minute. Particularly those of West African descent or Ghanaian descent. And we know that triple negative breast cancer is known to be more aggressive. And then we know that Black women are also more likely to have inflammatory breast cancer, have cancer diagnosed at younger ages with higher grades, and therefore less favorable prognosis. Turns out that Hispanic women, and now that we know about the genetic makeup of Hispanic women also have a higher propensity of developing triple negative cancers as well as HER2 positive cancers, Both histologies are known to be more aggressive. They're also diagnosed at younger ages with higher grades and stages. However, their prognosis is more favorable than their Black and white counterparts. And I think part of that has to do with biology that we don't understand very well. Asians, we know, are more likely to have estrogen receptor positive cancers, but also some of the Asian populations, some have a higher predisposition of developing HER2 positive breast cancers, slightly above non-Hispanic whites. And then Native American women are more likely to have HER2 positive breast cancers compared to non-Hispanic whites. So we know that there are also many other genetic drivers that may be different depending on the different population. Now, talking about these genetic makeups of these cancer cells, there is a very large world atlas study looking at the association of tumor tissues and these markers. And if we look at the bottom line, this is an international effort, and thousands of women's tissues have been gathered for this study. The bottom curve looks at the data for breast cancer, and you can see that 84% of the data has been gathered in Europeans, with only 4% of African samples, 1% of Hispanics, and 11% of Asians. So even in these trials looking at cancer tissues, there's lack of representation for other ethnic groups. And then talking about the overall prognosis, and again, coming back to race and ethnicity, these are the SEER data from 2015 to 2019. And here we see that despite having about equal incidence between non-Hispanic whites and non-Hispanic Blacks, the overall prognosis remains worse for the non-Hispanic Blacks. Not quite as severe, but the non-Hispanic and Native population also has a fairly negative prognosis, and that number appears to be worsening, whereas the data of prognosis for both whites and Blacks actually is improving significantly. And Asians and Hispanics have the overall better prognosis. So this is the more positive curve right here, which is showing the declining overall cancer incidence and mortality amongst the different racial and ethnic population groups. And here's where we see that the mortality is decreasing most significantly and has decreased by 25% since the onset of this data gathering, which was in the last about 10 years, most significant for the Black population. Next to that for the white population, but least favorable for the American Indians, which, as I mentioned before, really need the most help. So what is being done so far? So as far back as 1993, the NIH developed the Revitalization Act, which was implemented to improve representation of women and minority population in clinical trials. So this is a theme that has been out there for a long time. And since there have been additional initiatives by the FDA and the NCI and multiple other organizations that have put forward some additional efforts with, unfortunately, slow improvement. Most recently, the Cancer Moonshot program implemented in 2016 by President Biden has invigorated this process to some extent, and the program has aimed at accelerating the progress against cancer, including investing in diversification and treatment technology and clinical trials, as well as education. On a local level here at Northwestern and Northwestern Medicine, we have developed a portfolio of research projects for advancing health equity as well. And we're projecting to open a medical facility in the Bronzeville neighborhood where we hope to be able to provide some of these services on a local level. And finally, There is progress being developed in our minority breast cancer clinic that we're in the process of developing that will have a pipeline to clinical trial research. And just to wrap up, I will conclude in saying that, well, there are a lot of similarities amongst the minorities. As I mentioned before, all the minorities share a lack of adequate screening, significant differences regarding genetics, genomics, and the overall prognosis are notable. Clinical trials over the last 3 to 4 decades have been overrepresented by white and European origin patients in the studies. These studies have been the studies that have been used to define the pillars of the therapy that we use for everyone today. Minorities are underrepresented in clinical trials, resulting in gaps of opportunity and understanding in terms of efficacy and safety of the appropriate treatments. And there are many personal as well as structural barriers that have resulted in these differences. The lack of proper inclusion for all minorities in clinical trials will result in inaccurate conclusions and ultimately hurt all of us. So we have to develop novel approaches to educate minority populations and to close those opportunity gaps. So I will stop right here and take, I think, questions at the end, but thank you very much. And I will log off.
Thank you, Dr. Tellez. Really appreciate that. There was a lot of great information in there. And I know you had a link here that I wanted to share. You know, we wanted to focus on the presentation, but she does have a video that she wanted to share with you all, that you all can look at another time. You can tell us a little bit about it, Dr. Tellez, the video right quick.
Sure, absolutely. So the link actually will go into a little bit more depth in terms of the impact of the Hispanic community and the recent growth of the Hispanic community, and also the magnitude of underrepresentation in medical and in oncology care in general. It's quite powerful, but I think for purposes of our meeting, we can move forward, and that'll be available for whoever's interested. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, our next presenter is Lizzie Wittick. Lizzie Wittick is a longtime breast cancer advocate with nearly 2 decades of patient advocacy experience, stemmed from a personal passion propelled by her mother's breast cancer diagnosis in 2003, her subsequent issues navigating the breast health continuum of care, and progression of disease and death due to metastatic breast cancer. Due to this experience, Lizzie is passionate about eliminating disparities, furthering efforts for better treatment, finding the cures, and ensuring patients who are diagnosed today have access to quality treatment and care that they need when they need it, no matter who they are. Lizzie has been instrumental in growing breast cancer mission programs and community research developments in and across the U.S., including patient services like screening and diagnostic assistance, financial treatment assistance, patient navigation, and other patient support services. In 2003, she led efforts to establish the first breast cancer patient navigator program in California that has since been widely accepted and adopted throughout the state and country. In 2006, she created the first of its kind Breast Health Collaborative in San Diego, California, to bring together nurses and lay navigators, community health educators, promotoras, patient advocate groups, etc., to share resources, best practices, emerging needs in the communities, and collaborative solutions. In public policy, she has chaired several California work groups and collaboratives, leading work to successfully pass nearly 30 bills at the state and federal level to protect breast cancer patients and the access to breast health care for the most vulnerable populations. In 2017 and 2018, Lizzie led efforts to pass landmark legislation that opened unprecedented access to breast and cervical cancer screening, diagnostic, and treatment services for the most vulnerable. She continues this work to achieve health equity and dismantle barriers throughout her work with Tiger Lily Foundation as their Director of National Programs and the HEAL Policy Center of Excellence. Lizzie, take it away.
Thank you so much for that introduction and for inviting us to be here today. Very excited to be on this panel with these other amazing presenters. I'm going to pull up my slides here, if I can. There we go. As Tarnika alluded to, I got started in this space because of my own mom's experience after being diagnosed, having a quick recurrence, and then being faced with metastatic breast cancer. We were told my mom had a year to live. And at that time, she was able to join a clinical trial. After being told she only had a year to live, my mom ended up living another 6 years after that intervention with the clinical trial. It was for a new combination therapy with for HER2 positive breast cancer with Herceptin. And so clinical trials are very near and dear to my heart, and making sure that they are diverse and inclusive and equitable is very near and dear to my heart, as well as the work that we're doing here at Tiger Lily. Part of my mom's experience at clinical trial, with her clinical trial, and taking her to those appointments and those check-ins and the infusion centers. Even back then, I was noticing and saying and asking my mom, why is everyone white and why is everyone older? My mom was the youngest person there by far, and she was about 50 at the time, which is kind of crazy. And I was the darkest person there, which is not saying much. And I grew up in a community that was very heavily Hispanic, Samoan, and Black. And so and I knew it didn't reflect where I lived. And so I started asking questions, and the more answers I got, and what Dr. Tellez was just sharing with us, the more I learned about that, the more I knew I had to get involved. So it's a great honor to work with Tiger Lily on this work to combat this. And I think we'll start with a quick, a quick video from our founder and CEO, May McCorm, who gives a great introduction into some of the work that we're doing in clinical trials.
Clinical trials are about people. They're personal. When I heard the words, "you have breast cancer," my first thought was, what treatments are there available for me? I'm here today, 15 years later, cancer-free, because of people that took clinical trials, that were in the clinical trial. When you hear the words clinical and trial, most people think about labs, rats, placebo effects, people being abused who were Black and brown. But without the right medicines and treatments, people can't have longer lives. And so it's important to understand not just what a trial does, but who is behind the trial and why it matters to them. Trials are about responsibility. There's a quote that I say a lot, and it says, "Service is the rent we pay for a living." And so when you think about a life of service, what do you do to help other people become better, healthier, happier, and whole? For me, the responsibility I have as a breast cancer survivor, a breast cancer advocate, and a leader is to ensure that people trust in trials, but more so that they have the right options in time. The fact is that women of color, Black women in particular, mostly have untargeted treatments for their breast cancers. We have the most aggressive cancers, yet we're the least offered clinical trials, which means treatments don't work for our bodies. And so it's really important to me, as the founder of Tiger Lily Foundation, as a Black woman, to ensure that we have better treatment options for patients of all colors and for those who are Black and brown. The fact is that for some people, a trial drug could be the difference between 6 months more of life, a year of life, 20 more years of life, or weeks. So many friends of mine are alive because of clinical trials. I myself am alive because someone took part in a clinical trial. And so the clinical trial campaign that we're launching with this, From Molecule to More Moments, is really about people, about life, about revolution, and about hope. You see, people that are behind these trials are like you and like me. They're mothers, fathers, sisters. They're men whose wives got breast cancer. There's somebody who lost a grandmother to a disease that they promised they would work to eradicate in their lifetime. You're going to meet people that are really amazing, that spend their lives in the lab, that are patients who are alive because of the trial and having treatments that now can keep them here longer. We hope you enjoy watching this campaign. I hope that you're educated, empowered, and that you find it inspirational as well. Thanks for watching.
And so as Mima shared in that video, this was the start of the campaign From Molecule to More Moments. And it really kind of shows what we're trying to do through our clinical trials program here at Tiger Lily. And to much of the same points that Dr. Tellez shared with us earlier, we know that people of color are underrepresented in clinical trials, as little as 3% of clinical trial participants. Yet these are the groups that have the highest mortality rates across many disease states, not just breast cancer, but especially breast cancer for Black women. And so we need to make sure that clinical trials are not a one-size-fits-all approach. That's how we ensure diversity, inclusivity, and equity. And that's the work that we're trying to support and do here at Tiger Lily. So as you can see there, our logo in the middle for our Tiger Trials program has 3 words in it: trust, transparency, transformation. And that really embodies the goals and the focus of this program. So we're really committed to building trust and transparency between our patients and our scientists, our researchers and stakeholders, biotech, pharma, CROs. And then in that, building those bridges for trust, we're also looking at eliminating barriers to that inclusion so we can achieve equity in clinical trials. And so this is all essential to us being able to transform the future of clinical trials. And that's what we're really pushing and driving to do this work together. This is essential to our mission to create a more equitable future for all people. And we move to do that through many different ways. So one of the ways you'll see on the right side here, meeting patients where there are. This includes understanding the details about each clinical trial and making sure that patients and the community are able to understand them in a way where they can take that away with them, share that information, and make decisions that are best for them with all the information that's needed. And that takes into account the patient's treatment journey, their lifestyle, their quality of life desires, their family beliefs, their cultural beliefs, and really making sure that education and outreach materials are written in this way that are plain language, easy to understand, and culturally responsible. And so another big part of our program here is collaboration. So we want to make sure we're collaborating internally at Tiger Lily with our other programs, which I'll talk a little bit about as well, but also with our external partners like Northwestern and Ricky in Touch, and making sure that we're all in on this fight and driving this transformation of the future of clinical trials together. And again, it's to reach this more equitable future where health equity is existing in clinical trials, because that's how we can really engage in these life-saving clinical trials. They're not life-saving if they're not doing the same work and they're not as effective for everyone, and they're not right now. As Dr. Celeste shared, we've had some of these great advancements in treatment, especially for breast cancer. But as the advancements have grown and we've moved to oral chemotherapies and more biomarker testing and more targeted therapies, the gaps have continued. This isn't new. I mentioned back in 2003 when my mom was in a clinical trial, I was seeing these issues. And so we're very committed to moving forward together and making sure that we're taking action and making these changes. So again, we're just very appreciative to be part of this conversation today, to be able to do that or be a part of that. I am having trouble switching my slides. There we go. My apologies. We shared a little bit about how we work with some of our other programs, and one that I'd like to highlight quickly is our Angel Advocacy Program. Angel is an acronym and stands for Advocate Now to Grow, Empower, and Lead. And this is our patient advocacy program. And I bring this up because one of the main goals and commitments of Tiger Lily is that the patient voice and experience as a forefront of everything that we do. And our Angel Advocacy Program really allows us to do this. So our Angel Advocates are young breast cancer survivors, patients, caregivers, or family and friends who are committed to and really want to become advocates for breast health equity. They join our program and go through a training sessions that consist of 6 different modules that go over kind of the basics breast cancer 101, because we want to make sure that they are well-versed not only in their own type of diagnosis and type of breast cancer, but in all, so that they can help others besides those that have similar diagnoses to them. And then we also specifically have a module that goes over clinical trials for this reason, to make sure that they are educated about what they are, how they work. And in that training, we do go over the historical mistreatment in clinical trials of populations of color and the abuse that happened in the past, not to linger on it, but so that people can understand where some of that mistrust comes from and the history of it. But then we push through that and we share some of the things, again, like Dr. Tellez shared, that have come about for protections for these patients. So they know what their rights are, what the questions are, what they have to get, informed consent, all these things that have come out of that. As well as the new policies like the NIH Revitalization Act and the Cancer Moonshot, again, that Dr. Tellez shared. And then we're talking with them about how they can be a part of that transformation and reforming that legacy of clinical trials as we move on, as we take the suggestions and recommendations and best practices from these things like the NIH Revitalization Act and implement them today into actions and changes that we can see to make clinical trials more inclusive and diverse. And it's really important to us that we are engaging these angel advocates after their training with these opportunities, which include opportunities to connect with our partners in the clinical trial space, not only to provide an advisory or feedback type of work, but to be included in these conversations from the start so that patients of color, their voices and their experiences are included in the design and development of clinical trials before it even gets to the patient stage. And so it's not just at the recruitment phase when we're saying we want to recruit diverse patients. They're there to help make sure that the clinical trials are designed in a way that they can be diverse once they're deployed. And so that's very important to us and our angel advocates as well. And this work, again, is done across the board with our external partners, internally at Tiger Lily, and in the community. So part of our work to do this and to diversify clinical trials and promote health equity is by addressing some of the most common barriers for Black women for breast cancer treatment and care as reported by our patients. So these are the 5 main buckets that we focus on, and you can see a few of them are specific to clinical trials, but there are also things within the others that affect clinical trials as well, like lack of access or biased media portrayals. And so it's important to us to make sure that we as an organization and our advocates and partners are addressing these barriers and dismantling them and providing the resources to overcome them so that they're no longer barriers for patients. To do this, we have several things. That the first is our barrier toolkits that we've developed. There's a couple examples here. You can see breaking the barriers to clinical trials, increasing Black and Brown representation in clinical trials. Understanding and addressing medical racism includes some information about clinical trials as well. There are 17 of these in total, but these show more direct examples to this work specific to clinical trials. But you can access all of these with the QR code there and the link there in the left-hand corner. But these are tools that have been developed to kind of explain and address the barriers, but then also provide tools and resources on how to overcome them. And they're also designed to be some for patient-facing and some for provider-facing, because we know it's going to take both sides to make these changes. And that's another reason we're so grateful for collaborations like this and knowing that we have allies in this work and we can all come together. But these are available for free for anyone, and they are really great tools. They're one of the favorites with our angel advocates and our partners because they are so tangible and realistic and provide those steps now today. Another program that we have that supports our work here for diversifying clinical trials is through our Inclusion Pledge. And this is really a program that provides a transparent and tangible framework across stakeholders and partners to identify and track equity actions. And so what happens is when someone takes the Inclusion Pledge, they make specific commitments of the actions and work that they're going to make that will dismantle systemic barriers and co-create solutions that will result in health equity for Black women and end these disparities. So this is a great program. We have so many great Inclusion Pledge members and other people in the community that are doing this work too. But when we get people to sign the Inclusion Pledge and make these commitments, then Tiger Lily and all of our partners can come together and support them to ensure that they're reaching those goals and metrics and making sure that that action is really happening, and then have a chance to come together through our Race Alliance to share those lessons learned, best practices and resources, and to move that forward. So here, this is an example that we provide to our clinical trial specific partners that are looking to figure out what commitments make sense for them and are looking for ideas and places to start. Again, as I mentioned before in our training, really understanding and that abuse that has caused mistrust in the medical system, the history of that is a great first step. And then being prepared to offer resources to tackle these systemic and individual barriers to inclusion in trials. We talk about things like transportation, childcare, financial stress, trials not being in geographic locations where patients live. Things like this can be individual barriers, but then we also have barriers that could be systemic, like the protocol maybe has something that is a deterrent, or the things that make you eligible might be written in a way that disproportionately affect Black patients so that they can't participate in clinical trials as often. And so it's being really cognizant of these things and working together to co-create solutions to those. On the right, you can see some examples of commitments that we have that are available for our partners. But all of these aspects of our work, we're really leveraging to try to make these changes, to make sure that access is equitable for Black patients who are dying at higher rates and facing higher disparities. Because again, as I said, until we have treatments that are targeted and work for those bodies, we're not going to have health equity. And I know that's what we're all here today working towards. And these are just some of the examples of how Tiger Lily is doing that. And I believe that is my last slide. My timer went off, so I want to make sure I don't go over all. I'll stop there. But and are we doing? I think we're doing questions at the end.
Yeah, we're gonna wait to the end and do questions, but thank you so much, Lizzie. I also share the link for the toolkits if anyone wants to go back and grab the toolkits after this in the chat box. So, all right, so moving on to our next speaker, Ricky Farley. Ricky is an award-winning seasoned marketing veteran that has transformed her strategic acumen into breast cancer advocacy. Ricky co-founded and served as the CEO of Touch, the Black Breast Cancer Alliance, to address Black breast cancer as a unique and special disease state with the overall goal of reducing the mortality rate for Black women. Ricky founded and serves as the co-host for The Doctor Is In, a weekly live breast cancer advocacy web series on the blackdoctor.org Facebook page that reaches over 3 million viewers. She is a founding member of hashtag Black Data Matters in a partnership with Citizen, the Center for Health Care and Innovation and Morehouse School of Medicine, to encourage and elevate the importance of Black women participating in clinical trial research. In January 2022, she started the When We Trial movement to change the game on Black women participating in clinical trials to improve outcomes for Black women with breast cancer. Ricky serves on the board of trustees for the Triple Negative Breast Cancer Foundation. She's a board member from the Center for Health Care Innovations and serves on the National Minority Quality Forum Scientific Advisory Board and the American Cancer Society's National Breast Cancer Roundtable Steering Committee. Ricky has been featured on a number of shows such as The Today Show with Hoda and Jenna, ABC News, in Essence, in Fierce Pharma, Healthline, Oprah Daily, Shondaland, Platform Forum, Q Health, and goes on and on and on and on. She is one of 50 of 800 applicants to receive the Goldman Sachs 1 Million Black Women Impact Grant, funding Black women-led and Black women-serving nonprofits. She was recently at the White House for the Moonshot briefing with Dr. Jill Biden. Ricky has 2 daughters, Amanda Brown Learman and Haley Brown, and 3 granddaughters, Belle, Leah, and Hart, who remind her of her purpose every day. Ricky is a graduate of Dartmouth College and holds an MBA from Kellogg here at Northwestern. Please take it away, Ricky.
Morning. Thank you. You didn't have to read that whole thing. So good to be here with you guys. And you know, so much of what I'm going to say is going to reiterate what these lovely, brilliant women have talked about, but I think we can't say it enough, right? So I'm going to just share my screen and I will go fast to, so I won't like repeat reinvent the wheel. Here we go. Basically, my story is I'll tell my story pretty quickly, but I had stage 3A triple negative breast cancer, and I did a double mastectomy. I did 6 weeks of chemo, standard of care chemo, 6 weeks of radiation. I was told I was NED, no evidence of disease. And then a month later, I went in for my annual checkup and had a PET scan, and the PET scan basically identified 5 spots on my chest wall. So my doctor said, okay, Ricky, you are now metastatic. We don't have any more drugs for triple negative. You have 2 years to live, get your affairs in order. And I said, well, I can't really die right now. I have a daughter at Dartmouth and I've got to pay for her to go to school. So me, you, and God and some drugs or something have to work this out. And I went to Dr. Google, and on the 3rd page of Dr. Google, after you're going to die, you're going to die, you're going to die, I found the Triple Negative Breast Cancer Foundation. And they recommended that I go to see Ruth O'Regan, who's an incredible doc, and she was in Atlanta at the time, no longer there, but she put me on 2 experimental drugs for TNBC, carboplatin and gemcitabine, which were just being experimented on TNBC. And I did a lot more chemo and I didn't die. And it's been 11 years. And so I know that God left me here to do this work. And I'm, been a fierce warrior, and I work for those little people on the screen, my grandbabies, Bella and Hart. So I'm going to breeze through these numbers. You guys know these numbers: a 41% higher mortality rate, a 39% higher recurrence rate, right? A 71% higher relative risk of death. And it really is the most fatal disease for Black women. These numbers devastate me. Black women under 30 get breast cancer at 4 times the rate, under 35 at twice the rate, die at 3 times the rate. And really, we're dying even under 40, well before we would have that first mammogram. So we don't even have a chance. We have dense breasts, we have all kinds of things going on, and we're not taken seriously by doctors when we go to show up at young ages. And I think Lizzie kind of talked about that. We have the lowest 5-year survival rate, and we're 3 times more likely to get triple negative breast cancer. And we don't really know why. We don't have enough science to know why that is, but that's what I had. And I think the special thing about triple negative breast cancer that makes it special is it's the only breast cancer subtype that does not have a drug to prevent recurrence. So we don't have a drug, and that's a frightening position to be in. We can't take something for 5 years. We also are more likely to develop metastatic breast cancer, and 58% more likely than white women to have de novo metastatic breast cancer. So we're getting it younger at later stages, and it's not great. This is our friend Shonda, who died a couple years ago. We now have a growing body of data too that is validating that a Black breast cancer cell looks different from a white breast cancer cell. And some of that data that's being done in West Africa by Lisa Newman and Melissa Davis is identified that there's a gene called the Duffy gene that is not on the panel that we test for that could be leading to triple negative breast cancer. But we don't have enough science, and we know that the drugs that we have as standard of care were never tested on Black bodies. And even what's happening now, I think you reported on that, Claudia, that it's 3% participation for Black women. And I believe the participation level should even be bigger than the population. It should be commensurate with the burden of disease. And I'm not smart enough to do that math, but if you think about triple negative, if we're getting it at 3 times the rate, the numbers in the trials need to reflect that burden of disease. What I've learned over the past few months, kind of being on the road in the community, is the level of Black health illiteracy is breeding health inequity. It's breeding it. We don't know what we don't know. And I hate the word underserved. We keep using the word the underserved, the unrepresented. I changed that word to unsupported. To me, underserved sounds like you have a dinner party for 10 people, but you only buy enough chicken for 4. And it's really the Black people don't even know there's a dinner party. And so we really need to educate our community. And I so appreciate what Tiger is doing, what everybody's doing in this group to educate patients, because they really don't know what they even need to know. They don't know what they're missing. A couple of years ago, we really defined Black breast cancer because it's a different disease. And I wanted to force these conversations with our pharma partners that it's different, it needs your support, it needs your help. And I'm just going to read this, but Black breast cancer is the constellation of exposures, experiences, and lack of science for Black women diagnosed with breast cancer that causes Black women to face disproportionately worse breast cancer outcomes. So I want to put the words on the paper so it's recognized and identified as a different disease state, distinctive. We did a research study 2 years ago. We talked to 300 Black breasties. We did a bunch of qual, we did 48 interviews and focus groups, and then we did a quant study with 250 Black breasties, all different phases of disease. And I'm a marketing person by trade. I wanted to understand what the fears were, what the barriers were. And we knew about the medical mistrust. We know about that, and that came out. But some really important things came out of our research. And we can't talk a lot about the quant because it's embargoed we're writing a manuscript, but I want to give you a snapshot that basically we heard stuff in our qual, like, don't do a clinical trial, you're going to get the sugar pill and die. That was a resounding conversation. It's a last resort. I don't want to be a guinea pig. I don't want to be an experiment. And what we learned is that they don't really understand the science. They don't understand it. And so first of all, some key things were doctors do not invite Black women into clinical trials. They are not being invited. And that's really the number one reason why they don't participate. They don't have a knowledge of them and even an understanding if they are invited. And I'm going to show you some data to that effect. We know that Henrietta and syphilis study are swirling in their heads, but it really was more than that. It was deeper than that. It was fear of the unknown. Fear of the unknown. You're not going to jump off that bridge if you don't know how deep the water is. You're not going to open that closet door unless you have some idea of what's behind it. It's fear of the unknown when you don't understand that there is no sugar pill in cancer research, that you aren't going to be a guinea pig, that it is not the last resort, that Advil you took last week was in a clinical trial, that heart medicine you gave your dog was in a clinical trial. And when you break it down and explain it to them in very simple terms, explaining what standard of care is, explaining that you're going to get a better quality of care in a clinical trial, all of that stuff resonates. And really one of the most resounding concepts we tested was do it for your daughter. You know, you're not going to do it for yourself because you're this badass Black woman with the purple cape and the gold crown. And so do it for your daughter. And all of that data kind of swirled into this big pot of information. But I think one of the most important things and why our campaign is working is the breastie voice is a trusted voice. We don't trust doctors. We don't trust pharma companies. We don't trust, the clinicians at the trial facility. We trust other breasties. And so we crafted communication, reflecting all of this learning, really giving the voice of trust to the breastie. This is just a quote that, and how are we doing for time, Tony? I don't want to be over. We good?
Good. Keep going.
Okay, so you guys can read this quote, but here she capsulized everything. My doctor never told me about it. I don't really trust my doctor. I've never been approached, and he didn't answer a lot of my questions. Another quote from our groups. I feel like a lot of research is not with Black women. So if I had someone who went through it already, I would trust them, the voice of trust from a breastie, right? Just a snapshot. Just a couple of charts from our data, but basically doctors are not inviting patients. Patients are bringing up the conversation. They're bringing up the conversation. And when they do bring up the conversation, they still walk away feeling ill-equipped, feeling uneducated, feeling like they're missing information, feeling uninformed. So when they go home and say, Mom, I'm going to do a clinical trial, they say, wait a minute, you're going to get the sugar pill and die. And they don't feel equipped with information enough to even defend that position to their families, and they drop out. So again, that conversation, that mistrust, that like just not understanding is really driving a lot of the issues in the situation. And they want more information. They want to know, am I going to get another, get different side effects? I don't want to feel pressured to make a decision. I don't trust the person. Am I going to be exposed? So all these reasons bubbled up, but it's really just because they don't understand the science. They don't understand it, right? So I learned pretty quickly that I can convince a breastie in 5 minutes to do a trial. It takes 5 minutes. Explaining what standard of care is. You're going to get a drug. You're not going to get a sugar pill. Explaining that it's in everything you're using right now that's in your house, for your kids, whatever. Explaining that you're going to get a better quality of care. You're going to get more scans. You're going to get faster scans. If you went on chemo today, you're probably not going to get a scan for 3 months. You won't know if the drug is working in your body. But if you're in a clinical trial, it's the best care. And frankly, if you're a Black woman under 40 and you get breast cancer, especially if you get triple negative breast cancer, the best thing you can do for yourself is to be in a trial because we don't have the drugs. So be in that trial, know that that's your best medicine. And then to do it for your daughter line I talked about earlier. My latest thing, which is not in our research, but I'm talking it up big time now, is like, you want that, that iPhone 14 that you want, that Tesla that you want to have, or that M1 computer in the Apple, the M1 chip in the Apple computer, or that big whatever television you want. You're buying science. You're buying science all around you. It's all around your life. You're counting on science to drive your car, to do all these things, to make your kitchen work. So why wouldn't you put the best science in your body? Why wouldn't you put the best science in your body? And that's what we're trying to communicate with the trials. So in my ideal world, if I had a lot of money, I would really bring clinical trial level down to people's things they're familiar with. So if I could have a Victorian house in a Black neighborhood in every major city, and you sort of walk down that street, you open up the wrought iron gate, you walk up on the porch, the beautiful Black grandmother gives you a hug, takes your 3 kids into the playroom, feeds them spaghetti. She takes you into the treatment room, which was just like a cushy chair with a quilt that she crocheted. She gives you a cup of tea with mint from her garden. She turns on Luther Vandross and she gives you the shot. And I know that's crazy and it's way out of reality, but that's the level of safety and care we need to provide for our patients. They need to feel warm. They're going from this community hospital where 80% of patients go, where they're sitting with those wooden chairs and they got to wait 3 hours. They see a different doctor every time. And people are eating fried chicken in the waiting room because they got to wait 3 hours and feed their kids. But that's their normal. And you put them in an Uber and drive them across town to the white doctor's office where everything's beautiful. There's beautiful back elevator music. There's roses on the desk. And there's nobody that looks like them. They're not going to engage. So where's that safe place, that space station? We're talking a lot about decentralized trials and technology, and all those things fall into play. But even in those scenarios, that mom of 3 kids probably single mom of 3 kids probably has the best cell phone you can, but she probably has the 14 or she's getting it. But guess what? That could be the computer for the household where her 3 kids have to do their homework. And she might have that bandwidth that we all take for granted, the unlimited minutes we all take for granted. And she might have the cell tire. So all these things have to be considered to make her feel safe and special, right? So we started our When We Trial movement, and we took all the stuff that we learned and really tried to build a movement that would acknowledge the mistrust. And I think, Lizzie, you talked about that. Yes, it did happen, and things are different because of it. Dispel the myths. No, there isn't a sugar pill. You're going to get a drug. You're going to get standard of care. And then also empower Black women to ask for the trials because they're not going to be asked. So how do we get them to give them the wherewithal and the information and the chutzpah to be able to say, hold on, doc, is there a trial for me? Is that what's the best option for me? And so I'm just going to play our video here and hopefully it will play. And I'm going to just go to YouTube and play a different one. Sorry. 1 second, I'm sorry. I need my techie people to help me with this. 1 second, you guys. I'm going to give up in a second. Hold on. Can you guys see the screen? Okay. Cue. I'm going to stop for 1 second.
When we trial, we make a difference in breast cancer research.
I'm
When
really
we
trying to
trial,
stop with that.
we save Black lives. When we trial, we defy the odds. When we trial, we do it for our sisters. When we trial,
You guys
we do
can't
it
see,
for our
right?
daughters and our sons.
When we trial, we set a new standard of
All right.
care.
Hold on. I'm sorry.
I was diagnosed with metastatic.
Okay. I will try this again. Can you see it now? Okay. Trying again, sorry.
When we trial, we make a difference
hear?
in breast cancer research. When we trial, we save Black lives. When we trial, we defy the odds. When we trial, we do it for our sisters. When we trial, we do it for our daughters and our sons.
When we trial, we set a new standard of care.
I was diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer. I was diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer at 19 years old. I was diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer at 38.
All you hear is cancer, cancer, cancer. You never think about what the doctor's saying.
Then the doctor looked at me and he said, "Did you hear what I said?" And I said, "Yeah, but I don't know how to be a breast cancer patient."
The numbers for Black women are devastating. Black women have a 41% higher mortality rate than white women. Black women have a 39% higher recurrence rate than white women. Black women get triple negative breast cancer, the worst one, at 3 times the rate of white women. So we're getting breast cancer younger at later stages and earlier ages, and it's just devastating. It's unacceptable.
I know my grandma had it and she beat it. And so I just knew that that was going to be me as well. So I think then my fight started, was when I realized, okay, I'm up for the fight for my life. So she said, "Well, you know, I got this good clinical trial. You can go on it as a second phase." And she said, "I think it'll work for you." But the first thing I asked her was like, "Am I going to be a guinea pig?" You know, because of our, you know, history with the Black culture. Over the years, clinical trials for many African Americans have been hocus pocus. So, you know, we know about Tuskegee and Henrietta Lacks. Clinical trial is no longer a dirty word. It is, it's a halo opportunity. It's a message from God. It's an opportunity for you to live past this moment.
But we need to get more African Americans into clinical trials because we are dying at alarming rates and we have to stop this. We really do.
And right now, there's only a 3% participation rate in clinical trials. And so through even the drugs that we're making now, there's no Black bodies being tested. As we built When We Trial, we tried really hard to make it for breasties, by breasties, about breasties, so people could see themselves in what we're doing.
Clinical trials are important. This is top-notch research that we need to have as a Black community. It's like a butterfly effect. We all got to help each other out in one way to get to the ultimate end goal.
And I think the onus is on us that are cancer survivors to tell the story. And the least that we could do is be on a trial. But how about for your children? And for your children's children? We got to do this thing. We got to save lives. It's just that important.
So we launched the campaign and we started out with a digital media campaign, pretty much. Who's going to talk? A digital media campaign. And then we moved into a radio campaign and we did radio ads in 10 markets targeting hip hop stations. So first we talked to breasties online. And then we said, okay, we need to talk to young women. They need to know about this before they need a trial. So we went on 10 markets, hip hop stations, and we started to get calls from young women. "Oh, can I do a trial?" And we're like, "Are you sick? Do you have breast cancer?" "No, but my grandma did, or my mom did, or whatever, but can I do something?" And so we sort of created this sort of messaging thing out in the world. And then we said, okay, this isn't enough. And so we said, we really need to hit the road. And I wanted to go where Black women live, work, play, pray, and slay. And so we've been to events all over the country and events that are not health related. We've gone to all kinds of events that are really not health related. We went to Essence Fest. We went to a Black Women Talk Tech event, the Urban League event, First Friday in Oakland, hair shows. So places where people are not in the focus of health, talking about health. And we felt like the people that are with the health events were preaching to the choir. They're already sort of talking about stuff. So we went over places where we could catch people off guard. And so far we've signed up 5,000 Black women into clinical trial portals since May. And I'm proud of that number, but so much more work to do to even make a dent in that 3% number. But we've had, a bunch of people sign up for our website, are getting emails now and getting information. And we just have been out there where Black women live, work, play, pray, and slay. And we're going to keep that going. We also continue to challenge the ecosystem. And we're working on several trials right now where we are designing the recruiting materials. We're designing the trial protocols. We're helping some of our pharma partners, like start at the beginning, as you talked about, Lizzie, in terms of how should the trial be presented. And I'm a marketing person. I keep saying that pharma advertising is some of the worst advertising you've ever seen. These metastatic breast cancer ads that show these beautiful older white women on yachts hanging out. Like, I have metastatic breast cancer. It's like such crap. And we learned that even from our research, that truth is critical. Truth is critical. Be real. Tell me I may die. Tell me what I'm up against. And frankly, we are all at risk. So be honest about it, but be intentional about it, intentional about the conversations. The patient stories and amazing. I mean, it's really what's got to tell the story. And, I've been challenged with your baby's ugly, but we'll help you fix it. But, if you take a real hard look at what the websites that talk about clinical trials and what pharma companies are saying about their drugs, it's not working. Show me something that's working and we can talk. But right now, you're only getting 3% participation. Cultural humility is what's going to make a difference. How are you making people feel? It's not just showing the Black woman in the ad, but thinking about how you're making her feel, right? And be deliberate and intentional about it. And, we're challenging pharma to use advocacy groups like us and Tiger Lily to help design the trials and the materials and get out of your comfort zone. And we can keep all talking every day. I get a Google alert for diversity in clinical trials. There's articles every day, but nobody's walking the walk. What are you actually doing to make a difference that's working? What's working for you? How many people are reading your stuff and looking at your website or not, right? We've got to move from this place of health inequity where there is no health equity to health equity. And that's only going to happen if every healthcare professional practices the golden rule. What does that mean? What your mother taught you when you were 2 years old? Treat others as you want to be treated. If we change the world so that everybody thought about, gosh, how am I making this person feel? How would I feel if I got this treatment plan with cancer? How would I feel if this were my mother or my grandma or my auntie? And challenge doctors, go back and say, is that the treatment plan you would offer to your family? If it's not good enough for them, it's not good enough for me. Challenge the status quo, stand up for yourself and know, have enough knowledge to be able to ask for the care that you deserve. I don't want anybody to die of breast cancer, but Black women deserve mortality rate parity. And that's what I'm working for. This is Belle. This is when she was 3. She's 5 now. A quick story. So we were in the shower in the summertime. I live at the beach. And so my grandma name is Debbie and her baby sister is still nursing. She has 2 baby sisters. It's like, so Debbie, how come you don't have those things on your boobs that baby heart sucks on? And so I said, okay, well, those are called nipples. And I sat for the next hour and explained breast cancer to her in every detail that I could, except for that I was going to die. And we showed her pictures. I showed her pictures of my old boobs. We talked about everything about boobs and breast cancer and how sick it's making Black women. But that is the last conversation I want to have with her. I don't want to have any more. I want it to go away. And we all say we're doing this for 10 years and 15 years. I don't want to be doing this in 15 years. I got about 10 years before she gets boobs. So she's my purpose to put me out of a job, and I help all of us out of a job. So thanks for letting me talk.
Thank you so much, Ricky, for that. And thank you all the speakers for sharing and engaging in this very important conversation. We do have one participant whose hand is raised. I'm going to allow you to ask a question, Wendy. Wendy?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't realize my hand was still raised. This is a very personal topic for me because I trained as a biostatistician in the 80s. I am a minority, and when I got breast cancer, it came on really fast. And when I got the diagnosis back from the radiologist, I realized how bad it was. She told me she wouldn't tell me anything until I came back in on Monday. But I spent the weekend looking for clinical trials. So yeah, I'm one of those people who look for a clinical trial. Now, I was lucky enough to be at Northwestern, but I brought the clinical trial to Northwestern and I was patient number 1 in it, and it was for triple negative breast cancer. I had to do an awful lot of things to get it to go through, including persuading the radiologist that it was okay to do a second biopsy because the clinical trial had a certain standard of what size needle and everything they wanted. And I had to even do education of Northwestern doctors as to how to do a clinical trial. And I think it only worked because of my background. Now, I was recently told that this is now the standard of care for triple negative, the drug that trial I participated in. And I'm very, very proud of that. Now, I ended up having the standard of care. I did not get the test drug, but I made a video for Gilda's Club where I talked about, even though I didn't get the test drug, I still got, as you mentioned, the higher standard of care. I mentioned that they picked up my out-of-pocket costs. So I did not go into bankruptcy because of a cancer treatment. And I got a lot of extra tests I wouldn't have gotten otherwise. So I am a big advocate for people to do this. But I think there's still a problem with people afraid of experimentation and afraid of the other. So that's my main comments. But I do have a question about the increased incidence and everything. Is that after cofactors have been controlled for in the odds ratios? Like, are they also controlling for other factors that can affect breast cancer, like smoking status, alcohol, and obesity?
Wendy, are you asking the risk factors for triple negative breast cancer?
No, I'm asking for the increased mortality for African Americans.
Yeah.
Is that after these cofactors have been controlled for in the odds ratios?
Yeah, so the answer is yes, Wendy, that even controlling for other cofactors, the mortality in triple negative breast cancer remains increased above the other populations. And the thought is that there's some biologic factor that we don't really know what it is, that obviously we need to research further so that we can tackle differently.
It's a different disease. We don't really understand it, but we know that the cells are different now. And that data all has to happen, which is why we need more Black women to be in research so that we can figure that out.
All right, we are down to our last minute here, and I wanted to allow Lizzie and Ricky to share how people like Wendy can get involved with your organization.
Sure, I put my website in the chat. I put my email address. Call me, email me, tweet me, and we're happy. I'll put our social media handle. It's at Touch BBCA. We also, we do our web series every Wednesday night on blackdoctor.org Facebook page. The doctor is in. We talked about lobular breast cancer last night. So we talk about anything and everything breast cancer. We also have a support group on the first Saturday of every month. But if you go to whenwetrial.org or touchbbca.org, I'll put that in here. You can sign up on our mailing list and sign up to our movement, and you'll get all the emails about. We send one email a week, sometimes two, but usually one email a week, so we don't crowd people's email boxes about our show topic for the week. And we definitely stay connected to our clinical trial people that are in our movement and send them information about trials and just try to keep connected. But I'll put everything in the chat.
Yeah, and we'd encourage anyone that would like to get involved in this work with Tiger Lily to become one of our angel advocates. I'll put that link in the chat. Ricky and Touch's When We Trial program, Tiger Lily's clinical trials program, our inclusion pledge to help connect you that way. We're a proponent for all of it. The ACCC Just Ask program, also focusing on just getting site assessments and biases training into clinical trial sites. We're a big proponent in helping with that. I know When We Trial with Ricky does a lot of similar work, also really trying to address that disparity, like Black women are just not being asked. And our angel advocates, we have a group of them that focus specifically on those tasks too. So you can get plugged into all those ways and all these organizations. And we're just really excited that you're willing to do this, and would encourage everyone to get involved.
Well, thank you so much. And again, Dr. Tellez, Lizzie, Ricky, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing with everyone why it's so important to increase diversity in breast cancer clinical trials. We want to thank everyone that joined us today for listening in and staying on and learning and engaging with us during this conversation. We hope to continue this conversation in other events like this soon. So again, thank you and have a great day.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you guys. Be blessed. Check your breasts.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.